The silence of deep space was broken by the hum of alien engines. 5 ships moved through the darkness between the stars, their blue hulls gleaming under distant starlight. The Zephyrian exploration fleet had been searching this empty region for 3 months, looking for anything of value. Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the scanner displays with growing disappointment. His tall, thin frame cast a shadow across the control panels as his 4 arms moved across different instruments. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for their skill at finding lost treasures in space, but this sector had given them nothing but empty void and cosmic dust. "Admiral," called out scanner operator Hicksville from her station. "I'm detecting something large ahead. Very large." Kextar's green eyes brightened with interest. His species had searched 1,000 dead. Systems and experience had taught him that the biggest finds often came from the most unlikely places. "Put it on the main screen." The bridge fell silent as the image appeared. There, hanging motionless in the black, was a ship unlike anything in their databases. It was enormous, easily 2 kilometers long, shaped like a giant metal arrow pointed into the darkness. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered in thousands of tiny craters from space debris and radiation, burns from centuries of exposure to cosmic rays. "By the 7 moons," whispered Navigation Officer Corrigan. "Look at the size of that thing." Dr. Velinara, the expedition's lead scientist, moved closer to the screen. Her pale blue skin almost glowed in the bridge lighting as she studied this strange vessel. Unlike her companions, who saw only salvage value, she was curious about the ship's design. It looked brutal and simple, covered in what appeared to be weapon mounts and armor plating. Whoever built it clearly expected to fight. "Run a full scan," ordered Kextar. "I want to know everything about that ship. Age, composition, power signatures, everything." The scanner teams worked for nearly an hour. The results made them all stare in amazement. The ship was old, incredibly old. Carbon dating suggested it had been drifting in space for over 800 years. But that was not the strangest part. "Admiral," reported Hicksville, her voice uncertain, "the material composition is unusual. The hull appears to be made from refined metals, but the molecular structure doesn't match anything in our databases. And, sir, there are crystalline formations throughout the interior. I've never seen anything like them." Dr. Velinara studied the readings carefully. "The power core appears to be inactive, but it's not like any design we know. The energy pattern suggests technology that operates on principles we don't understand." Kextar nodded slowly. In his 40 years of space exploration, he had seen the ruins of dozens of dead civilizations. Most were pathetically primitive compared to modern galactic technology. This ship, however, seemed different. Still primitive, but primitive in a strange way that made him uncomfortable. "Any identification markings?" he asked. "Some kind of symbols on the hull," replied the scanner operator. "But they don't match any known language. The computer can't translate them." Security Chief Zanuck, a heavily built warrior from the military, Cast stepped forward. His scarred face showed suspicion rather than wonder. "Admiral, this ship is huge and armed. We should be careful. What if it's some kind of trap?" Kextar almost laughed. "Chief, look at those readings. That thing has been dead for 8 centuries. Whatever species built it is long extinct. This is just another relic from one of the countless primitive races that once crawled around the galaxy before they destroyed themselves." The Admiral was confident in his assessment. The galactic hegemony had ruled space for over 600 years, bringing peace and order to thousands of worlds. Before that, the galaxy had been filled with dozens of small, warlike species who fought constant battles until they wiped each other out. The historical records were clear about this chaotic period. though many details had been lost over time. Salvage. Teams, prepare for boarding, Kekstar commanded. That much refined metal will keep our construction projects running for years. And Dr. Velinara, I want you to study those crystal formations. If they contain any useful technology, the science, Ministry will pay us very well. As the Zephyrian ships moved closer to the derelict, none of them noticed the faint energy reading deep inside the ancient vessel. It was so small that their instruments dismissed it as background radiation. Deep within the ship's core, in a chamber sealed behind layers of armor and quantum encryption, something waited. The boarding operation began 2 hours later. Teams of workers in environmental suits cut through the outer airlock with plasma torches. The metal resisted their efforts at first, but eventually gave way with a shower of sparks that quickly faded in the vacuum of space. Interesting, noted Dr. Velinara as she watched the cutting operation. That hull material is remarkably dense. Our plasma cutters should have gone through it much faster. Inside the ship, the corridors were dark and cold. Emergency lighting had failed centuries ago, leaving only the beams from the workers' helmet lamps to show the way. The passages were wide and tall, clearly built for beings roughly the same size as Zephyrians. But the design was different. Everything looked functional, built for durability rather than comfort. The walls were covered with strange symbols and what appeared to be warning signs. The Zephyrian translation computers could make no sense of them. To the salvage teams, they were just meaningless scratches left by another dead race. The layout is odd, reported team leader Bixmel over the communication system. These corridors are built like a fortress. Multiple sealed sections, blast doors every 50 meters. Whoever designed this expected to fight battles inside their own ship. As the teams moved deeper into the vessel, they found more puzzling features. Weapons lockers filled with strange devices that looked both primitive and sophisticated. Computer. Terminals with displays that showed no familiar technology. And everywhere, those crystalline formations that Dr. Velinara had detected from outside. Admiral, she called over the radio. These crystals are not natural. They're some kind of data storage system, but operating on quantum principles that our science is only beginning to understand. Whoever built this ship was far more advanced than we initially thought. But Kekstar was not listening carefully. He was focused on the salvage estimates flowing across his command screen. The amount of refined metal in this ship would make him wealthy beyond imagination. The Science Ministry might pay extra for the strange technology, but the real value was in basic materials. Keep working, he ordered. I want that hull plating stripped and loaded onto our cargo ships within the week. None of the Zephyrians realized what they had found. To them, it was just another primitive relic from the chaotic past. They had no way of knowing that this ship had once been the pride of a fleet that fought against forces they could not imagine. They could not read the symbols that identified it as the UNSC Retribution, one of humanity's most advanced warships. And they certainly had no idea that their plasma cutting and unauthorized boarding had triggered ancient security protocols that had been waiting 800 years for exactly this moment. Deep in the ship's protected core, quantum computers that had been dormant for centuries began their startup sequence. Warning lights that had not glowed since the final battle started, blinking in the darkness. And in a medical bay sealed behind multiple layers of armor, sophisticated machinery began the delicate process of reconstructing human consciousness from quantum backup storage. The Zephyrians continued their work, unaware that they had just awakened something that would change the galaxy forever. 3 days into the salvage operation, Junior Technician Pleikter was having the worst day of his career. The young Zephyrian had been assigned to cut through what the team leaders thought was a simple interior wall. His plasma cutter had been working fine all morning, slicing through the strange metal like it was soft cheese. But this particular section was different. "Come on, you stupid thing," he muttered, adjusting the power settings on his cutting tool. The beam flickered and sparked against the wall, but barely left a mark. He had been working on the same spot for 2 hours, with almost nothing to show for it. The wall looked exactly like all the others they had cut through. Dark gray metal with those strange symbols carved into the surface. But something about this section was wrong. The metal seemed denser, harder, and there was a faint humming sound coming from behind it that made his skin crawl. Plychter cranked the plasma cutter to maximum power. Safety regulations said never to exceed normal cutting parameters, but he was tired and frustrated. His supervisor would be angry if he did not finish his section by the end of the shift. The beam brightened to an almost blinding white-hot intensity. Wall suddenly gave way. The plasma beam punched through the metal and struck something on the other side. There was a brilliant flash of blue light, followed by a sound like thunder that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Plychter was thrown backward by an invisible force, his cutting tool spinning away into the darkness. Emergency alarms began, wailing throughout the alien ship. Red warning lights flashed in the corridors as teams of workers stopped what they were doing and looked around in confusion. The sound of the alarms was joined by another noise, something none of them had heard before. It was like the deep, steady breathing of some enormous creature. "All teams, report status immediately," came Admiral Kekstar's voice over the communication system. He sounded calm, but there was an edge of concern in his tone. Team leaders across the ship began checking in. Most reported that nothing unusual had happened in their sections. But from deep in the vessel's interior, Team Leader Bixmail's voice crackled with static and worry. "Admiral, we have a problem down here." Technician Plychter breached some kind of sealed chamber. There was an energy discharge, and now the ship is... "Well, sir, the ship is doing things." "What kind of things?" demanded the Admiral. "The lights are coming on, sir. And I mean lights that have been dead for 800 years. There are sounds coming from the walls, like machinery starting up. And Admiral, the temperature is rising. This ship is warming up." On the bridge of the Zephyrian flagship, Dr. Velinara watched her scanner displays with growing amazement. Energy readings from the derelict ship were climbing rapidly. Systems that had shown no activity for centuries were suddenly drawing power from sources her instruments could not identify. "Admiral," she called out, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "The quantum signatures from that ship are off the charts. Whatever they triggered, it's activating technology throughout the entire vessel. Deep inside the human warship, in a chamber that had been sealed for 8 centuries, Captain Sarah Chun felt consciousness return like a tide washing over a beach. It came slowly at first, just fragments of memory and sensation. The smell of recycled air, the familiar hum of a ship's life support systems, the gentle vibration of a reactor core cycling through its startup sequence. But something was wrong. Her last clear memory was of the battle at Reach. The Covenant fleet had broken through the orbital defense platforms. The evacuation ships were trying to escape while the Navy held the line for as long as possible. She remembered giving the order to activate the Phoenix Protocol, the experimental quantum preservation system that was humanity's last desperate gamble. "Athena," she whispered, her voice hoarse from centuries of disuse. "Status report." The ships. Artificial intelligence responded immediately, her voice warm and familiar in the sterile medical bay. "Welcome back, Captain. Phoenix Protocol revival sequence is complete. All primary biological functions are stable. However, I must inform you that our situation has changed significantly." Sarah tried to sit up, but her muscles were weak from the long preservation sleep. The medical bay's recovery systems were already working, feeding nutrients and stimulants into her bloodstream through the quantum reconstruction process. Around her, other preservation pods were beginning their own revival sequences, as her essential crew members were brought back to life. "How long?" she asked. 847 years, 2 months, and 16 days since Phoenix Protocol activation, Athena replied. "Captain, we have uninvited guests aboard. Unknown alien species has been conducting salvage operations on her hull for the past 72 hours. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. 800 years. Earth, the colonies, the war against the Covenant. All of it was ancient history now. And someone was stripping her ship for scrap metal. "Show me," she ordered. The medical bay's main display lit up with images from the ship's internal security cameras. Sarah watched alien beings in environmental suits moving through her corridors, cutting holes in bulkheads, removing equipment, and hull plating. They worked with the casual efficiency of people who thought they were salvaging a dead wreck. "They have no idea what they're dealing with, do they?" Sarah asked. "Negative, Captain. Their technology appears to be several centuries behind our capabilities. They have dismissed the retribution as a primitive relic. Their communication intercepts suggest they believe we are the remains of an extinct civilization." Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. These aliens were picking apart her ship like vultures feeding on a corpse. They showed no respect for the vessel that had carried her crew through dozens of battles against impossible odds. Worse, they seemed to think humanity was just another dead race that had destroyed itself in some forgotten war. "What's our tactical situation?" she asked as feeling returned to her legs, and she managed to sit up. "All primary systems are operational and responding to reactivation protocols. Weapons, shields, and propulsion are coming online now. The quantum reactor is at 30% power and climbing. However, Captain, I must advise you that these aliens appear to represent a galactic civilization we have no records of. The political situation has clearly changed dramatically since our time." "On her display, Sarah could see more details about the aliens. They were tall and thin, with 4 arms and pale blue or green skin. Their technology was advanced, but seemed to focus on energy weapons and exotic matter manipulation. Very different from both human and Covenant designs." "Any sign of the Covenant?" she asked. "Negative. No energy signatures, ship designs, or communication. Protocols match Covenant technology. It appears the galaxy has moved on from the conflicts of our era." Sarah stood up carefully, testing her balance as the medical systems finished their work. Around her, the rest of her senior staff were beginning to wake up. Commander Torres, her first officer; Lieutenant Kim, her tactical officer; Chief Engineer Macready. Faces she had known for years, people who had chosen to trust her with their lives when they activated the Phoenix Protocol. "Athena, begin full system activation. I want shields, weapons, and engines ready for combat operations. But keep it quiet. Let's not alarm our guests just yet." "Understood, Captain." "Shall I begin revival procedures for the full crew?" Sarah considered this. The Retribution carried a crew of 800, all preserved in quantum storage. But bringing everyone back would take time and resources. For now, she needed to understand the situation better. "Just the essential crew for now. And Athena, I want a full analysis of these aliens. Their technology, their language, their intentions. Find out everything you can." "Already in progress, Captain. I have been monitoring their communications since reactivation began. They appear to represent something called the Galactic Hegemony, a multi-species government that has controlled this region of space for over 600 years. Sarah walked to the medical bay's observation window and looked out at her ship. The Retribution was coming alive around her. Lights flickered on in corridors that had been dark for centuries. The gentle vibration of the quantum reactor grew stronger as more systems came online. But she could also see the damage the aliens had done. Sections of hull plating were missing, Equipment had been removed from storage areas. They had violated. Her ship treated it like junk to be broken down and sold. "Captain," came Commander Torres's voice from behind her. "Good to be back. What's our situation?" Sarah turned to face her old friend. Torres looked exactly as she had 800 years ago, thanks to the quantum preservation process. But there was something different in her eyes. The same realization that their world was gone. Their war was over, and they were strangers in a galaxy that had forgotten them. "We're not in Kansas anymore, Elena," Sarah said grimly. "And it looks like nobody remembers Dorothy." The ship shuddered slightly as the main engines completed their startup sequence. On the alien salvage ships, alarms began ringing as they re. Sensors detected the massive energy output from the supposedly dead vessel. The Retribution was awake, and it was not happy. Admiral Kekstar stared at his scanner displays in disbelief. The dead ship that his crews had been salvaging for 3 days was now showing energy readings that made no sense. Power levels were climbing by the minute, and systems that should have been cold scrap metal were coming online with frightening speed. "Dr. Velinara, explain this to me," he demanded, pointing at the energy readings. "How does a ship that's been dead for 8 centuries suddenly start working?" The scientist studied her instruments with growing concern. "Admiral, I've never seen anything like this. The power source appears to be some kind of quantum reactor that operates on principles we don't understand. And look at these readings. The ship's hull is actually repairing itself." On the main screen, they could see the Retribution clearly. Now that its lights were on, the ancient vessel looked far less dead than it had 3 days ago. Sections of hull that had been damaged by centuries in space were slowly healing themselves. Missing armor plates were being rebuilt by streams of tiny machines that flowed across the surface like liquid metal. "Sir?" called out scanner operator. Hicksville, her voice shaking. "The ship is moving." They all watched in stunned silence as the massive human warship slowly turned in space. Its movement was smooth and controlled, not the random drift of a derelict. It was positioning itself to face the Zephyrian fleet directly. "All salvage teams return to base ships immediately," ordered Kekstar. Whatever was happening to that ancient vessel, he did not want his people aboard when it finished waking up. Security Chief Zarnak stepped forward, his scarred face grim with worry. "Admiral, recommend we withdraw to a safe distance. If that thing has weapon systems coming online, we could be in serious danger." Before Kekstar could respond, every communication system on his ship began broadcasting the same signal. It was a voice speaking in a language none of them had ever heard before. The words were clear and strong, with a strange accent that somehow sounded both ancient and threatening. "Athena, open a channel to the alien vessels," Captain Chun said from the bridge of the Retribution. "Let's see if we can talk to our uninvited guests." The human warship's bridge was now fully operational. Captain Chun sat in her command chair, surrounded by her senior officers. The bridge displays showed detailed information about the 5 alien ships that had been stripping their vessel for parts. The aliens' technology was impressive by the standards of Chun's time, but 800 years of human advancement had made the Retribution far more sophisticated than anything these newcomers could build. "Channel open, Captain," reported communications. "Officer Lynch, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the United Nations Space Command vessel Retribution," she said in clear, measured tones. "You are currently in violation of our territorial space and have conducted unauthorized salvage operations on our ship. Identify yourselves and state your intentions." On the Zephyrian flagship, the translation computers worked frantically to decode the alien message. The language was unlike anything in their databases, but the meaning was becoming clear. Dr. Velinara listened to the translation with growing amazement. "Admiral, they're claiming this ship belongs to something called The United Nations Space Command. But, sir, there's no record of any such organization in our historical databases. And they're speaking as if they have legitimate authority here. Kekstar felt his confidence returning. Whatever technology this ship possessed, its crew was clearly suffering from some kind of delusion. No primitive species from the chaotic past could have any legitimate claim to territory in modern space. Open a channel, he ordered. Let's straighten out this misunderstanding. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Kekstar of the Galactic Hegemony Exploration Fleet. You are mistaken about your situation. This ship is a derelict relic from a dead civilization. We are conducting legal salvage operations under hegemony law. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Captain Chun listened to the translation with cold anger. These aliens had just told her that humanity was a dead civilization and that they had the legal right to strip her ship. Worse, they were demanding that she surrender to inspection like some kind of criminal. Athena, analysis of their fleet. Capabilities, she said quietly. 5 vessels, Captain. Energy-based weapons and defensive systems. Their largest ship masses approximately 400,000 tons. Advanced by the standards of our original era, but no match for our current capabilities. Recommend displaying. Superior firepower to establish negotiating position. Commander Torres, bring point defense systems online. Target their weapons only, minimal damage. Aye, Captain. Point defense ready. On the Zephyrian ships, alarm sirens began wailing as their sensors detected weapons lock. The ancient vessel had just painted every one of their ships with targeting beams more precise than anything in their own arsenal. Evasive action, shouted Kekstar. All ships, evasive action. But there was nowhere to run. The human ships' targeting systems tracked them perfectly as they tried to maneuver. Then the Retribution fired, the weapons that struck the Zephyrian. Fleet were unlike anything they had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or missiles, strings of what appeared to be small metallic projectiles reached out across space at incredible speed. The projectiles struck with surgical precision, disabling weapon systems without causing hull breaches or casualties. In seconds, the entire Zephyrian fleet was defenseless. What just happened? Demanded Admiral Kekstar, as damage reports flooded in from his other ships. How did they disable our weapons so quickly? Dr. Velinara checked her readings in amazement. Sir, they used kinetic projectiles, tiny pieces of metal fired at extremely high velocity. But the precision is impossible. They hit exactly what they wanted to hit and nothing else. Security Chief Zarnak studied his tactical displays with professional interest. Admiral, this is military technology, far beyond anything we possess. Whoever these people are, they are not primitive. On the Retribution's bridge, Captain Chun felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens had gotten the message that they were not dealing with a helpless derelict. Now perhaps they could have a more reasonable conversation. This is Captain Chun. Your weapons are disabled, but your ships are undamaged. Your crews are unharmed. We are not your enemies, but we will not tolerate being treated as salvage. I'm requesting a diplomatic meeting to discuss this situation. Admiral Kekstar looked around his bridge at the worried faces of his crew. These humans, if that's what they were, had just demonstrated military capabilities that made his entire fleet irrelevant, but they had also shown restraint. They could have destroyed the Zephyrian ships, but chose not to. Dr. Velinara, do we have any records of this United Nations Space Command in our historical files? The scientist worked quickly through the databases, searching, Admiral. The name doesn't appear in any major historical records. But, sir, our knowledge of the pre-hegemony period is incomplete. Many records from that era were lost or classified. Captain Chun, Kekstar said carefully, I am willing to discuss this situation. But I must point out that according to our records, There has been no human civilization in this region of space for over 600 years. There was a long pause before the human captain responded. When she did, her voice carried a note of sadness that had not been there before. "Admiral, what happened to Earth?" The question caught Kekstar off guard. Earth was mentioned in some of the oldest historical records as the homeworld of one of the many species that had existed during the chaotic period. But like most worlds from that time, it had been forgotten. We have no current information about that world," he admitted. "Our records from the pre-hegemony era are limited." "Athena, scan their databases," Captain Chun ordered quietly. "I want to know what happened to humanity." The AI's response came moments later, transmitted directly to the captain's earpiece. "Captain, I have accessed their historical records. The information is disturbing. According to their files, humanity disappeared from galactic affairs approximately 600 years ago. The records suggest our civilization collapsed during something called the Species Wars, but details are classified at the highest levels." Captain Chun felt a cold emptiness in her chest. Her worst fears were being confirmed. Humanity was gone. Earth was forgotten. The Great War against the Covenant, the colonies, the billions of people she had sworn to protect, all of it was ancient history that these aliens barely remembered. "Admiral Kekstar," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions she was feeling. "I believe we need to have a much longer conversation. Your people have forgotten something important about galactic history, and I think it's time someone reminded. You, the human warship, moved closer to the Zephyrian fleet, its massive bulk dwarfing the alien vessels. On both sides, crews watched each other with mixtures of fear, curiosity, and growing understanding that this first contact would change everything. In the depths of space around them, automated listening posts that had been silent for centuries began receiving activation signals. Ancient human technology, hidden and forgotten, was starting to wake up across the galaxy. The aliens had found more than just one ship. They had found the key that would unlock humanity's return. Captain Chun sat in her ready room, staring at the data files that Athena had pulled from the Zephyrian computers. The information painted a picture that made her sick to her stomach. Humanity had not just been forgotten, it had been erased. "Show me the official records again," she said quietly. The wall display lit up with translated text from Galactic Hegemony Historical Archives. According to these files, humanity had been a minor warlike species that destroyed itself during something called the Species Wars approximately 600 years ago. There was no mention of Earth's colonies, no record of the war against the Covenant, no acknowledgement of humanity's role in defending other species. It was all lies. Athena, cross-reference this with our own historical data. I want to know what really happened. The AI's analysis was swift and damning. "Captain, the timeline suggests that humanity's disappearance coincides with the formation of the Galactic Hegemony. Official records claim the hegemony was created to bring peace after the chaotic species wars. However, our data indicates that the war against the Covenant was still ongoing when we entered preservation sleep." Chun stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, she could see the 5 Zephyrian ships waiting nervously at the edge of weapons range. Admiral Kekstar had agreed to a temporary ceasefire while they discussed the situation, but she could see his ships were ready to run. If things went badly, she had a choice to make. She could let these aliens leave and try to find Earth on her own, or she could send a message that would echo across the galaxy. "Commander Torres, report to my ready room," she said into her communicator. Elena Torres arrived minutes later, her face grim. She had been reviewing the same data files, and Chun could see the anger burning in her old friend's eyes. "They wrote us out of history," Torres said without waiting for Chun to speak. 800 years of human achievement, our sacrifices, our victories, All of it labeled as the destruction of a primitive species. The question is what we do about it, Chun replied. We could disappear again. Find a quiet corner of the galaxy and try to rebuild. Or we remind them who we are. Torres finished. Sarah, if they erased us once, they'll do it again. How many other species have been written out of history to maintain their precious peace? Chun nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. The galactic hegemony claimed to rule over thousands of worlds, bringing order and prosperity to the galaxy. But their peace was built on lies and forgotten graves. Athena, begin deep scan of the Zephyrian ships. I want complete technical specifications. Crew rosters, communication logs, everything. Scanning now, Captain. Their computer security is surprisingly weak by our standards. I should have complete access within minutes. While the AI worked, Chun made her decision. The Zephyrians had come here looking for salvage. Instead, they had found something that would shake their entire civilization. It was time they learned the cost of forgetting humanity. All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's communication system. We are no longer in preservation mode. This is now an active combat situation, battle stations. Throughout the retribution, the remaining crew members moved with practiced efficiency. Weapon systems that had slept for 8 centuries came online. With deadly purpose, shield generators began charging to full power. The massive ship's engines prepared for combat maneuvers. On the Zephyrian flagship, Admiral Kekstar watched his sensors with growing alarm. The energy readings from the human ship were climbing to levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. Sir, reported Dr. Velinara, their power output is now exceeding our entire fleet combined, and they're jamming our communications. We can't contact Hegemony Command. Security Chief Zarnak studied his tactical displays with professional respect. Admiral, they're using communication jamming technology that operates on quantum frequencies. We have no defense against it. And sir, they're moving. The retribution began to accelerate, its massive bulk moving with surprising grace. But instead of charging directly at the Zephyrian fleet, it was heading for the asteroid field where they had first discovered it. Follow them, ordered Kekstar, but keep maximum distance. I want to know what they're planning. What the humans were planning was a lesson in terror. Captain Chun had decided that if the galaxy had forgotten humanity's military capabilities, it was time for a practical demonstration. The asteroid field would provide the perfect hunting ground. Athena, full stealth mode. Let's show our guests how we used to hunt Covenant ships. The retribution seemed to fade from the Zephyrian sensors as its stealth systems engaged. Advanced electromagnetic dampeners and quantum camouflage made the massive ship nearly invisible to their detection. Equipment. Where did they go? Demanded Admiral Kekstar, as his scanner operator frantically adjusted her instruments. Unknown, sir. They just ... disappeared. The hunt began with Navigator Koritin's ship. The Zephyrian vessel was conducting a careful sensor sweep of the asteroid field when the rocks around it suddenly came alive. What the crew had thought were harmless chunks of stone revealed themselves to be camouflaged, human sensor drones that had been launched from the retribution. The drones swarmed the Zephyrian ship like angry insects, attaching themselves to the hull and sending data back to the retribution. Within seconds, the human ship knew everything about the vessel's capabilities, crew positions, and weaknesses. Then the retribution struck. The attack came from 3 directions at once. Magnetic accelerator rounds punched through the ship's shields, as if they were made of paper. But instead of destroying the vessel, the rounds were designed to disable. Engine systems shut down. Life support remained functional. The crew was unharmed but helpless. This is Captain Chun, came the human voice over their communications. Your ship is disabled but your crew is safe. Do not attempt to restart your engines, or we will be forced to take more aggressive action." One by one, the other Zephyrian ships tried to rescue their companions or escape the asteroid field. Each attempt ended the same way. The humans seemed to know exactly where each ship would be before the crew made their move. Their weapons struck with impossible precision, disabling systems without causing casualties. Dr. Velinara's science vessel lasted the longest. Her crew had managed to boost their sensor power and briefly detected the retribution as it moved between asteroids. But the glimpse only confirmed their worst fears. The human ship was enormous, heavily armed, and moving through the asteroid field like it owned the entire sector. "Admiral," she called over the emergency channel before her ship was disabled. "Their technology is beyond anything we understand. They're not just advanced. They're operating on principles that won't be developed for centuries." The last ship to fall was Admiral Kekstar's flagship. The humans had saved it for last, letting him watch helplessly as his entire fleet was systematically hunted down. When the retribution finally revealed itself, floating directly in front of his bridge viewports, Kekstar understood that he was completely outmatched. The human ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its hull was scarred from centuries of battle, but every system was functioning perfectly. Weapons that could destroy planets tracked his ship with casual precision. This was not the crude relic his people had been salvaging. This was a predator that had been built for war. "Admiral Kekstar," came Captain Chun's voice. "You wanted to salvage our ship. Now I think it's time we had a conversation about what you've salvaged from human space over the past 600 years. The Retribution's tractor beams locked onto the Zephyrian flagship and began pulling it toward the human ship's docking bay. Kekstar realized with growing horror that he was about to become a prisoner of a species that was supposed to be extinct. "Dr. Velinara," he called over the internal communications. "Send an emergency signal to any hegemony ship in the area. Tell them we've encountered a hostile force with technology beyond our understanding." But Dr. Velinara's response filled him with despair. "Sir, they're still jamming all our communications. No signal can get through. And Admiral, I've been analyzing their quantum signatures. This isn't just one ship. There are other signals out there. Faint, but growing stronger." "What do you mean?" "Sir, I think we woke up more than just this ship. There are automated signals being transmitted across the galaxy. Old signals, using quantum frequencies that predate the hegemony. I think we've activated some kind of network." As the Zephyrian flagship was pulled into the Retribution's docking bay, Admiral Kekstar realized that his salvage mission had become something much more dangerous. They had not just found a dead ship. They had found the key to humanity's return. And across the galaxy, in hidden locations that the hegemony had never discovered, ancient human technology was beginning to wake up. Ships that had been waiting for 8 centuries were receiving activation. Codes, automated defense systems were coming online. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, other human crews were beginning to emerge from their own preservation sleep. The galaxy was about to remember why humanity had been so dangerous, that an entire civilization had worked to erase them from history. The interrogation chamber aboard the Retribution was a simple room with white walls and bright lights. Admiral Kekstar sat across from Captain Chun, separated by a table that looked ordinary but was probably made from materials more advanced than anything on his ship. Dr. Velinara sat beside him, her scientific curiosity warring with her fear of these humans who should not exist. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Captain Chun said, her voice calm but cold. "Your people found human ships, human colonies, human technology scattered across the galaxy. And instead of wondering what happened to the people who built them, you simply took everything and wrote us off as extinct." Kekstar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The human captain looked young, but there was something ancient and dangerous in her eyes. Captain, you must understand. The species wars ended over 600 years ago. All records indicated that your people had destroyed themselves, fighting with something called the Covenant. We thought we were just cleaning up the debris. The Covenant, Chun repeated, and for the first time, real emotion crept into her voice. Tell me, Admiral, what happened to the Covenant? Dr. Velinara consulted her portable computer. According to our historical records, the Covenant Empire collapsed. During the final phase of the species wars, their technology was absorbed by the early hegemony. Some of their member species are now part of our civilization. The silence that followed was so complete that Kekstar could hear his own heartbeat. Captain Chun stared at them for a long moment, then started laughing. It was not a pleasant sound. You allied with them, she said finally. The species that tried to wipe out all organic life in the galaxy. The fanatics who burned entire worlds because they thought all other life was heresy. You made them part of your precious hegemony. Captain, I don't understand, Velinara said carefully. Our records show the Covenant as just another aggressive species that was pacified and integrated into galactic society. Chun stood up and walked to the wall display. With a gesture, she activated a holographic projection that filled the room, with images of space battles, burning worlds, and alien creatures that made the Zephyrians gasp in recognition. This is what your Covenant allies did to the human colony of Harvest. 3 million civilians. They burned them all because they thought human life was an insult to their gods. This is Reach, where we made our last stand. This is Earth, where we fought for the survival of our entire species. The images continued, showing battle after battle where human ships fought against impossible odds. Ships that looked primitive, compared to the Retribution, but which fought with desperate courage against enemies that wanted to destroy everything humanity had ever built. We held the line, Chun continued, her voice growing harder with each word. We fought and died while you and your hegemony were busy building your peaceful civilization on our graves. And when we disappeared, you took our technology, our colonies, our history, and you gave our enemies seats at your table. Alarms suddenly began ringing throughout the ship. Commander Torres's voice came over the intercom system, urgent and professional. Captain to the bridge. We have multiple contacts incoming. It's a hegemony battle fleet. Chun looked down at the two aliens with something that might have been pity. It looks like your friends have come to rescue you. This should be interesting. On the bridge of the Retribution, the main display showed the approaching fleet in detail. 27 ships of various designs, representing different species within the galactic hegemony. Energy weapons, quantum shields, gravity manipulators, and other advanced technology that would have been impressive 800 years ago. Analysis, Athena? Fleet composition includes vessels from 8 different hegemony species. Total combined. Firepower approximately equivalent to a single Covenant destroyer from our era. Recommend minimal engagement rules to avoid unnecessary destruction. Commander Torres, bring all weapons online. Lieutenant Kim, I want shields at maximum. Chief, Macready, how's our power situation? Reactor at full capacity, Captain. All systems green. We could fight 10 fleets this size. The hegemony fleet spread out as it approached, trying to surround the lone human ship. Admiral Vexrai, the fleet commander, had received the emergency transmission before the Zephyrians were captured. A single alien vessel had somehow defeated an entire exploration fleet. It was his job to destroy this threat before it could do more damage. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Vexrai of the Galactic Hegemony Defense Force. You are holding hegemony citizens prisoner and have committed acts of war against our civilization. Surrender immediately or face destruction. Captain Chun opened. a channel to respond, but instead of speaking to the alien admiral, she broadcast on all frequencies across the entire galaxy. Every ship, every planet, every communication station in hegemony space received her message simultaneously. People of the galaxy, I am Captain Sarah Chun of the United Nations Space Command. We are humanity, the species your leaders chose to. Forget, for 800 years, you have lived in peace built on our sacrifice. You have used our technology, settled our worlds, and allied with our enemies. Today, that ends. The hegemony fleet opened fire. Energy beams and exotic matter weapons struck the retribution from all directions. The display showed a light show. That could be seen from neighboring star systems as enough firepower to destroy a small moon focused on the human ship. When the firing stopped, the retribution hung in space, exactly where it had been before. Its shields had absorbed the entire attack without even flickering. Our turn, said Captain Shun. The human ship's response was swift and terrible. Magnetic accelerator rounds reached out across space with perfect accuracy. Each shot was calculated, not to destroy, but to disable. Weapon systems exploded. Engine core shut down. Shield generators overloaded. In less than 30 seconds, the entire hegemony fleet was helpless. But Chun was not finished. Athena, transmit the historical files, all of them. I want every communication network in the galaxy to receive the real history of the species wars. Across hegemony space, billions of beings suddenly found their communication devices broadcasting information that had been classified for 6 centuries. The true story of humanity's war against the Covenant. Records of human colonies that had fought to the last defender. Technical specifications for human technology that the hegemony had been using without understanding its origin. And most damaging of all, recordings of hegemony leaders making the decision to erase humanity from official history to prevent other species from learning that organic life could be so effectively defended. The reaction was immediate. On 1,000 worlds, protests erupted, as people learned they had been living lies. Species that had lost their own homeworlds to the Covenant discovered that humans had died trying to save them. Scientists realized that technologies they thought were hegemony innovations had actually been stolen from human ruins. Captain, reported Torres, we're receiving transmission from across the galaxy. It looks like our message got through. On the main display, reports flowed in from human listening posts that had been dormant for centuries. Ancient defense platforms were coming online. Automated factories hidden in asteroid fields were beginning production. And most importantly, other human ships were reporting successful revival from Phoenix Protocol preservation. How many ships, Athena? Preliminary count suggests 47 vessels of various classes scattered throughout the galaxy. All reporting. Successful crew revival and full operational capability. Admiral Vex Rai's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with desperation. Captain Shun, please. We can negotiate. The hegemony leadership was not involved in the decisions made 6 centuries ago. We can work together. Chun looked out at the disabled fleet, then at the reports flowing in from across the galaxy. Her people were waking up. Humanity was returning. But the galaxy had changed, and not for the better. Admiral, your civilization has had 600 years of peace. You've grown soft and comfortable, fed by the technology and resources of the species you forgot. But the universe is not a peaceful place. The threats that drove us to fight are still out there, waiting in the dark between galaxies. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. We died for you once. We won't make that mistake again. When the darkness returns, and it will return, you'll remember why you needed us. But this time, you'll face it alone. The retribution began moving away from the disabled fleet, its massive engines pushing it toward the edge of the star system. But before it disappeared into hyperspace, Captain Shun delivered one final message. We are returning to what was once human space. Any hegemony ship found there will be treated as hostile. You have 1 standard year to remove all your settlements and installations from human territory. After that, consider them to be under new management. As the human warship vanished into hyperspace, emergency broadcasts began spreading across the galaxy. Ancient listening posts were transmitting coordinates to hidden human bases. Automated defense systems were demanding identification from approaching ships. And in the deepest parts of space, things that had been sleeping for centuries were beginning to stir. The galaxy was about to learn that some species should never be forgotten, and that humanity's capacity for both protection and